You pick up your phone, you see the message, you read it, you put the phone down, and you don't reply. Not because you forgot, not because you're busy. You just can't. Not yet. Something in you goes quiet the moment you think about responding, and so you leave it there, sitting, while the notification stays red and the other person waits. Most people would call that rude, or avoidant, or just lazy. But that's not what's actually happening. And if you've ever done this, if you've ever checked a message, understood it completely, and still couldn't bring yourself to type back, then this is going to explain something you probably never had the words for. On the surface, it looks like a small thing, a delayed text, a seen message with no response. But look a little closer, and you'll notice it's never random. It almost always happens with specific people or specific types of conversations. Not with your group chat sending memes, not with a friend confirming plans. It happens with the messages that carry weight. The ones that need a real answer. The ones where you feel something the moment you read them. That feeling, that slight tightening, is the whole story. Because when you delay a reply, what you're really doing is buying time between a stimulus and a response. And that gap isn't emptiness. It's full of something. Usually it's one of three things: emotional exhaustion, social pressure, or fear. Let's start with emotional exhaustion, because it's the most misunderstood one. There are people who genuinely want to respond. They care about the person. They want to be present. But the idea of forming a reply, of finding the right words, matching the right tone, giving the conversation what it deserves, feels like lifting something heavy when you're already tired. Not physically tired, emotionally. These are usually people who spend a lot of their day managing how they come across, at work, in social situations, around family. By the time they're alone with their phone, the part of them that handles all of that is simply offline. The message isn't being ignored. The person reading it just has nothing left to give at that moment. Then there's social pressure, and this one is quieter. Some people delay because they're overthinking the response itself. They'll read a message 4 times, consider different ways to reply, worry about sounding too eager, or too cold, or too much. They're not ignoring you, they're actually paying too much attention to you. Every word feels like it has consequences. So instead of risking the wrong one, they say nothing for now. And here's where it gets interesting. Because underneath both of those, the exhaustion and the overthinking, there's usually something older. A pattern that didn't start with texting. It started much earlier. A lot of people who struggle to reply learned at some point in their lives that their responses had consequences, that saying the wrong thing caused conflict, that being too honest created distance, that people didn't always react well to what they actually felt, and so over time they developed this habit of pausing before they speak, of measuring their words carefully, of making sure what they say won't disrupt something. It was a smart adaptation once. It kept things safe. But now, it shows up as a seen message with no reply, a conversation left half-finished, a relationship where one person always feels like they're waiting. The behavior didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere that made complete sense at the time. Here's what makes this pattern particularly heavy to carry. The person doing it usually knows it looks bad. They know the other person might feel dismissed, and that awareness creates its own pressure on top of everything else. Now, they're not just overwhelmed by the message, they're also carrying guilt about not replying, which makes replying even harder. Because the longer it goes, the bigger the reply feels like it needs to be, and the bigger it feels, the harder it is to start. It becomes a loop, and people can sit inside that loop for days, sometimes longer. What's interesting is that this same pattern often shows up in other places too, in decisions that get delayed, in conversations that get avoided, in feelings that get processed alone instead of shared. It's not just about texting. It's a broader way of moving through the world carefully, quietly, always managing exposure. These are often people who think deeply, who feel things fully, who take relationships seriously enough that they don't want to get them wrong. The behavior that looks like distance is sometimes the result of caring too much, not too little.